Finland's on the verge of environmental crisis. Depleted deforestation, habitats, rising emissions. It's clear that the biodiversity within Finland has been completely drained. As such, immediate intervention is required. BWF can restore and preserve Finland's biodiversity whilst maintaining long-term returns through our dual mandate. We plan to do this through conservation efforts, nature-positive businesses, and nature-positive mechanisms that would ultimately restore biodiversity, increase carbon storage, and support sustainable land management. We plan to do this in 3 core pillars. BWF will have 3 portfolio groups that create long-term financial and biodiversity value. Our global portfolio group will act as a fund diversifier, while green infrastructure and sustainable enterprise groups will be an installation into Finland's green value chain, ultimately aligning portfolio performance to reach our triple bottom line.
This is our biodiversity screening framework, a 250-plus point KPI system. So we classify our investment into 3 bucket classes: fully aligned companies ready to invest, transition to alignment companies engaged in 2-year roadmap, and non-aligned companies. Our screening process is divided into 2 tiers. Tier 1 is for policy and governance, checking for if companies publish annual sustainability reports, if they have measurable biodiversity targets for 2035. Tier 2 goes deeper into operation. We assess for forestry and land certification, restoration programs, and for green infrastructure. However, since SMEs have limited resources compared to large corporations, we won't be using same standards for all. So, as you can see, for large corporations, our standards are stricter. However, for SMEs, our standards are more flexible. Our investment strategy is about active stewardship. We collaborate, engage, and guide companies toward their path to alignment, as divestment is our last resort. While we designed this conceptual framework, implementing this KPI into our portfolio requires specialized expertise. For this reason, we decided to outsource our data collection, methodology refinement, greenwashing mitigation with continuous improvement to third-party verification.
Thank you. For our first pillar, one of the fund's mandate was to provide long-term financial returns without undue risk. And for this exact reason, NatCapital proposes the construction of a global portfolio group that focuses on providing direct financial returns from public markets. Using proxy funds and capital market assumptions from institutional asset manager leaders such as CIBC and BlackRock, we were able to come up with an optimizer that focused on 50% equities and 50% fixed income. Looking at our backtesting results, we see a very low correlation, an R-square of only 0.046 when compared to the Helsinki index. This proves that this is good means to diversification when it comes to concentration risk due to high investments in Finnish securities. Also, NatCapital proposes and throws the idea of implementing biodiversity alignment score directly in the objective function of the portfolio optimizer. This would have to happen towards the latest stage of our 10-year time frame due to the lack of data. The reason we would do this is because we see biodiversity not as a constraint, but rather as a driver of revenue and impact. Moving on our second pillar, which is a direct driver and impact provider on biodiversity, Green Infrastructure Group, we propose Project Suo Revive, the purchase and the restoration of 200,000 hectares of peatland. Finland there's approximately 9 million hectares of peatland in Finland, and roughly 50% of that has been degraded. It's being used for forestry extraction and peatland extraction. So while this is a grave risk, this is a great opportunity for Borealis Wealth Fund to gain from it. There's 3 main points of leverage: habitat units issuance revenue, and 2 other points that also act as diversification of returns, which is land appreciation and timber revenue. 2 main points of our strategy that are crucial are the partnership with biodiversity credit certifiers, which ensure that our accounting methods for credits are fit, and then secondly, our collaboration with ESG consultancy firms. We want to hire experts to improve our project and improve our developments as we go. Based on the UK DEFRA credit model, we were able to approximate just under 500,000 habitat units over a 30 years period. Every project has its cost, with a mean restoration cost per hectare of just under 900 euros. This is very feasible. And one of the things to account is that different areas of peatlands have different levels of degradation. This could be detrimental due to the significant varies in cost, but this is also positive because it provides significant drivers of impact. Moving on to revenue, NatCapital applies a 30% markup on credits, and this is solely based on the fact that corporates and businesses on the same line of business provide a 40% to 100% markup. This would result in a price range of 2,600 euros to 5,800 euros. Impact is important, but what's most important is providing impact in the mindset shift. So for this reason, we provide a pilot project on habitat banking where we create a link between landowners and developers in Finland who need these biodiversity credits. This case study in England proves to be feasible. It comes from a gross revenue of 300 million where a profit was generated of 130 million. It's very important when we're talking about habitat banking, two strong pillars of it are policy alignment and collaboration framework. Policy means we need to implement our restoration targets directly within Finland's national laws on climate change and nature preservation. Secondly, collaboration between private investors, public investors, and academic researchers is future-proofing our future when it comes to biodiversity and Finland returns.
Our third and last pillar is Sustainable Enterprise Group, which is the intersection of both natural capital, policy, and entrepreneurship. They come together to find a better world for Finland's green future. Finland has currently a number of policy frameworks that are currently pushing forward the future of the green transition. As such, this creates a huge opportunity for Finland to take the next step. BWF seeks SMEs as that core solution. SMEs currently lead the economy of Finland, and as such, provide a great stable standpoint to proceed in that future. These frameworks position natural capital and circular SMEs as the foundation of growth cycles. So using a buy and sell model and buy and build, we plan to provide sustainable enterprise and future-proof the green economy. By widening access to capital, Finland can empower greening SMEs. Interestingly enough, it's found that rural SMEs have the same environmental and economic impact as those in major cities, meaning we can make a long-standing and national impact. As such, we can drive regional growth, find better jobs, and measure biodiversity and climate impact nationally. Despite current frameworks for enterprises, there have been massive underfunding and undercapitalization for the green transition of SMEs. So much so that they're one of the highest and undercapitalized in the EU. As such, structural underfunding for green capex has become a defining market inefficiency and one that institutional and traditional lenders cannot take on due to the risk. This gives BWF a huge advantage to position itself through sovereign-led, risk-tolerant capital in order to find both economic and environmental solutions. We don't see PE as just a catch-all under fund returns. We see it as a way, as a catalyst to really solve biodiversity in the core of Finland. As SWFs, as seen above, has largely increased its allocation to private markets, we see that as a possibility that startups are a greater innovation that can lead the change in Finland. Not only that, in terms of policy frameworks, they integrate alignment with all of them so that we can find not only biodiversity solutions, but economic ones that will lead Finland as a national and global leader. Our solution, buy and build, is two-faceted. Singularly, we seek to take a 25% allocation in active management in order to have hands-on solutions enabling active and strategic alignment for the long-term value chain. And then build. We want to empower these SMEs through strategic value creation while aligning their growth with Finland's national biodiversity goals. Through partners like Tessie and Metsä, we plan to find active alignment and find global solutions that decrease risk and stimulate the deal pipeline. Regulatory barriers are key. So through regulatory partnerships, VC funds, we can find alignment and core strategic partnership, as well as academic solutions that can provide a strength and structure for this PE field.
When talking about strategy, we have to implement timeline. And we decided to do a three categories time-based. Starting in 2026, there's allocation towards research and initial funding. Moving on to 2030, there's a heavy capital deployment when it comes to our direct drivers of the biodiversity while also generating returns. And in 2035, we see a fully aligned portfolio that not only provides long-term financial returns, but is a driver of positive biodiversity impact. Finland's journey to sustainability is one that takes effort. It takes action, but most importantly, it takes intention. And at NatCapital, we are more than just providing solutions to alignment to the mandate. We are envisioning a future where we can all coexist sustainably. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for your presentation. It's very insightful. Do we have any questions from the panel? Leslie?
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Do you have detail around the asset allocation itself and like the sector, geographical exposures, how you arrived at 50-50 in your global portfolio?
Yes. So I'll start with the global portfolio. So we say 50-50. The way we approach this is we used proxy funds. And the way we decided on proxy funds was by doing a filtering and screening criteria on Bloomberg, to be more specific. We looked for funds that are aligned with Article 9, that are aligned with sustainability, with sustainable sources of funds and returns for them. And then based on that, we pulled them together, funds from equities and fixed income focused funds. And based on the optimizer, we were able to derive a direct, just because of the lack of data when it comes to biodiversity alignment. Moving on to the strategic asset allocation, we started this thinking of cost. And what that means is that we accounted for how much do we expect our impact drivers on biodiversity to cost us. So that means how much capital allocation will they take. And based on that, we move on to our second impact driver. And then what is left is the global portfolio group, which is a financial returns driver. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, you hit it on the nose.
Great.
Just have a
Stephanie?
follow-up question to
Yeah.
that. Yeah, just curious about, so for example, in the green infrastructure group or in the sustainable enterprise group, like what types of investments do you envision in those pillars? Thank you.
So our green infrastructure group is comprised of current forestry and land holdings, especially here, right here, is the current forestry and land holdings of the legacy portfolio of the case. And as we transition, our impact drivers in our projects are the Suo Revive, which the peatland restoration, and the peatland restoration and the habitat banking. And as we progress throughout timeline, we see here is where the fully aligned portfolio is built. Yeah.
I mean, for SME integration and our PE slip, the main focus was to understand the limitations of private equity in terms of the duration that these investments take. In initial stages, we want to create a pipeline that not only is setting up a stable foundation for private investment, but also one that can lead Finland to the future through this circular economy and the circular roadmap set up by Citra. So in initial stages, we seek just to create pilot projects as well as aligning ourselves with both academic firms and with investment funds, and even in the regulatory space with firms like Metsä to essentially set up the foundationary period that would lead us towards the future. Towards 2030, that's where we're going to start taking actual deals and starting to broaden ourselves in the global community. As mentioned before, there's regional and rural exposure, not as just major cities. So we want to hold PE on a national level in order to find firms that are leading this green economy. And then towards our third stage in 2035, we do institutionalization. So this is where we're broadening our private equity slip to kind of major infrastructure and major academic institutions that can not only lead the private equity kind of portion, but also help us integrate kind of align our solutions with policy frameworks. All of these are both accounted in cost, but also the average private equity kind of investment expectation through capital market assumptions, which is sitting currently between 10 to 15%.
So there's a couple of your pillars that are highly internal economy dependent. and that are also based on the idea of growing with GDP, helping entrepreneurship, and the such. When we see your development plan over the next 10 years, you're reaching expected returns of 9.1%. Do you expect there to be an inflection point where you will no longer be able to source the type of projects, whether it's in your banking sleeve or your infrastructure sleeve, to go reach these types of returns?
I think a major concern as presented with BWF is its dual mandate to seek biodiversity solutions as well as long-term returns that are risk-adjusted. Our core kind of vision for BWF is that we're able to stimulate both forestry capital, natural capital, and green solutions for the future. You're 100% right that with the growing infrastructure and a growing economy, that we may reach limitations. But in situations like peatland and habitat restoration, we do seek a practical solution that takes degraded biodiversity, like biodiversity unaligned land, then to restore, forestry capital, which could be anything from old growth forests to, crop and grasslands that could yield biodiversity returns. And then on the private equity kind of SME side, it's important to note that there's always growing innovations, and we want to really stronghold those innovations for the betterment of Finland. So I think as we develop, it's really to kind of the market to decide how we engage, and if we don't find, we want to really enforce the ones that we already have.
I can just add to that. From a high-level explanation or framework, it is very uncertain, but the way we account for the returns, especially in infrastructure group, is through policy push. We are a sovereign wealth fund that is government-backed, and we are not just here to provide financial returns, we have a say. At the end of the day, this is what we're tasked, dealing with biodiversity loss. So if we push on policies, if we push just like in England's case where they have imposed a 10% biodiversity net gain on developers, where all developers now are forced to do that, then Finnish demand for biodiversity credits will increase. And that means that returns and developments in this group will also increase. It's a very high-level explanation, but this is how we thought of it.
Christoph?
Maybe on the infrastructure group, you have two projects where you kind of talk through assumptions, and then when I look at the overall return assumptions at the end, kind of like 7, 8, 9%, like how do you reconcile having IRRs in the kind of low single digits versus portfolio objective? Overall, it's probably in the high single digit, and then you have to trade these off.
Well, I want to start by saying Project Sewer Revive, so peatland restoration, has a very low IRR. When we did our calculations, and we made a lot of average assumptions where we assumed average cost, average revenue, and these can vary significantly. The IRR was approximately 1.91%. And the fact that we're okay with that is because we don't see these as a revenue driver right now. We see it as an impact driver. We are focused on this project solely to provide a solution on biodiversity impact. When it comes to returns, we focus on global portfolio group, we focus on SME developments, which we think are the next big thing when it comes to Finland, and we are future-proofing Finland's future throughout those developments. I don't know, any other part of your question? I'm sorry.
No, that makes sense. But like, how do you think of I think there's 50% in the global portfolio and then 20% in like, as in how do you think of a dollar allocated to one versus the other?
Oh, I see. Okay. So the way we approached that was we established a reference baseline for expected return on our fund as a whole, and we established 6.5%, solely due to the fact that we are given that in the case, and we don't want to go lower. Why don't we try and keep this steady? And so based on that, we decided, okay, if our global portfolio group is going to be our return driver, and we know that our other impact drivers will probably not make us much money, what do? Well, then we expect higher returns on our finance drivers so that they kind of compensate. And so for that reason, when we kind of ran that high-level framework of understanding, we decided that a big part of our fund was going to be the return driver because it had to compensate for this returns-wise. I don't know if... I hope I answered your question.
John Sebastian?
Awesome. While the Sustainable Enterprise Group is the smallest piece of the portfolio, each and every different piece of capital that will be given to small and medium enterprises will be quite small. How do you intend on making this feasible from an operational standpoint?
For sure. One of the core kind of focuses that we had when we were developing private equity was that, you're 100% right. The deal slips that we were really looking at were going to be ranging between 2 to 10 million euros. Given that, we really wanted to focus on building infrastructure and institutionalization and the external framework, both with our reputational and regulation partners. So the regulatory framework, like METSA, as well as the Ministry of Finance, Environment, they act as like regulatory policy drivers that we need to develop a relation with through active stewardship and development, which takes capital allocation, as well with academics, investment. We have to invest in academia, universities, to create almost a future pipeline to develop talent for these pools. Private equity, especially in green innovation, takes a lot of manpower and really, really smart people. So in order to do that, we really want to focus in on these institutions, academic institutions, and give them the funding they need to really produce those people so we have the best talent hitting Finland.
And perhaps if we were to go at the last slide on asset allocation, something that I no longer see that was part of the portfolio is the 10% allocation to cash. Could you speak a bit more about if you do intend on maintaining a cash allocation?
Yeah, so for that, it is part of our global portfolio group. We decided to put a limit of 5% set, and I will preface by saying, in the previous presentation, we heard that, why do you keep cash? Because you could use other sources. I think cash is best. But yeah, we implement that into the global portfolio group at 5% of our global portfolio group, which is 23 billion at target year.
Amazing, Stephanie.
Maybe staying on the same page. So can you walk us through your modelization from your having an expected return of 9% while your GPG portfolio is expected to bring 8%? So can you walk us through how you get to 9%?
Yes. I'll just say, I think it has to do with your returns because they grow exponentially.
So you wanted to touch on GPG. We recognize that private equity takes a long time to grow and develop. So while this is a huge value driver, we do see that the private equity solutions will start to deliver returns in the forefront of past 5 years. Also, given that the first 2 to 5 years is really focused on developing deal pipelines as well as pilot projecting a lot of these private equity investments, we see the expected duration of these private equity investments really yielding towards 2030 to 2035, 2032. So we do see slight returns growing in those areas, but given that we do see past 2035, we want to create a landscape for the future. We're trying to future-proof Finland's green economy, and the whole focus of creating a circular economy that really reinforces the green transition is hugely important to us.
So what is your expected return for the SIG portfolio?
Oh, for SIG or for infrastructure or enterprise?
Both.
So for
SIG is the
yeah, so for enterprise, we really do expect to meet kind of median private equity returns. So that modeled presently with capital markets essentially between 10 to 15%, but obviously there's constraints to that. So we have took kind of modestly conservative assumptions. So we kind of allocated to less than, but also remember that we do toss a bunch of money back in to apply costs. So it also came into a calculation of cost over revenue.
Sorry, I just don't want to waste more time because we only have 3 minutes. This is still 1.91% IRR because we took an average return and the restorations last for 30 years. So we cannot account for a higher return on GIG just because it's been 10 years. And then GPG based on capital market assumptions is the main return driver here. Sorry.
I think we have time for one more question. Amazing.
What would you say is the key risk your strategy is exposed to, and how do you mitigate that?
You know, interestingly enough, I think it's a multifaceted answer. I wanted to touch on kind of one key point. You know, our key risk in SME deployment, we kind of wanted to focus across all areas. So we do see that in all our solutions, there's a variety of risks that, you know, focus on policy, you know, exit risk, and there's a variety of economic tailwinds that we really need to foresee. The way that we really address this is by broadening our kind of partnership and focal kind of strategic allocation to one that like accounts for all. I think Arben, we have 1 minute left, so I'll let him talk about infrastructure group.
Yeah, well, I was going to touch on the point, the fact that Finland is in a very good path to transition alignment, but when doing research, we were seeing that there's still not that full mindset employment when it comes or deployment when it comes to sustainability targets. For example, the government still has not fully approved the current laws that are being developed on climate change and nature preservation. So regulatory risk is what I'm trying to say. Could be a risk, but we think that it is not a big one just because of the fact that this is urgent, and sooner or later people will realize that they have to focus on this.
Just super quick to touch on, you know, with regulatory risk, one of the parts that we touched on in our methodology is really active stewardship. And, you know, like by partnering with regulatory frameworks and institutions like METSA, we are able to really foresee those and, you know, have hands-on approach to how we're able to address those regulatory risks. In our kind of regulatory framework, we're hedging both policy and geopolitical risk through those partnerships that really are able to give us a less of a risk return when we're dealing with those investments.
Amazing. Let's give them a round of applause, please.